If you've purchased an album, and by album I mean an actual physical vinyl copy of an album in the last few years, you know that splatterwax is all the rage. As of the recording that we're doing right now, the #1 album, physical copies, in the US right now is by Megadeth. Megadeth's album exists in at least 27 different color variations, and of those, at least 17 are multicolored splatterwax. But did you know that splatterwax actually goes back more than 100 years? We're going to talk about splatterwax, or splatter shellac, today on the 78 RPM channel. Hello, and welcome to the 78 RPM channel. Whether you're new to 78s or an advanced collector, this is your source for information, research, and music about 78 RPM records, cylinders, and radio transcriptions. Hey gang, welcome to the 78 RPM channel. If you are a new collector, or even if you ever were, your heart probably jumped a little bit the first time you found a multicolored shellac disc. For most of you, that probably would have been one of these. This is a Pathé splatterwax disc. Now, David Deal may not be a collector that most of you know by name, but he probably should be. He's responsible for The Blue Pages, an encyclopedic guide to party records. He was also responsible for the short-lived digital magazine E-Discographer. Issue #1 of that, from the year 2000, cited a 1926 issue of Talking Machine World, which said, "The Pathé Company is now marketing a new record known as the Chanticleer. It is a mottled record. The conventional black of the Pathé record has been replaced in this instance by a combination of black and maroon, which gives it excellent display value." David Deal points out with his subtly wicked sense of humor, they actually kind of look like institutional linoleum. But these discs were called the Pathé Chanticleer series, and they were produced for roughly 6 months, and are in most cases the first Splatterwax 78 shellac discs that collectors are going to discover. They were not, however, the first Splatterwax discs. In the second decade of the 20th century, you may recall there were some unpleasantries known as the Great War. Well, Vocalion jumped on the patriotism bandwagon, and they produced some splatterwax discs. Those two discs had very patriotic themes, the first of which was produced in late 1918, and it utilized a red, white, and blue splatterwax pattern, and it contained 3 songs: America, the Star-Spangled Banner, and a patriotic medley. Vocalion's second disc came soon afterward, and it was a medley of national songs from the Allied countries. This time they used at least one color from each of the flags of the Allied nations, resulting in a really striking splatterwax disc that contained red, white, blue, green, and yellow. And if you're wondering, I believe yellow is the color for Belgium on this disc. This is the more common of these two discs, but that doesn't make it common. In fact, a good clean copy, if you find it for under $100 and it's in good shape, that's still a bargain. Pick it up, even if you don't want it, somebody does, you can trade them something for it. While Vocalion produced these 2 discs for general sale, that doesn't mean they were the only 2 that they made. In 1920, they produced this rare disc using masters from their regular catalog. Now, this disc was probably not issued to the public in this format. This is, in fact, the only known copy. It was sold by Kurt Knock in his 40th anniversary auction in fall of 2024. Unfortunately, not to me. It was apparently intended to honor President Woodrow Wilson and the United States Marines for their part in the war. So Vocalion made at least a few splatterwax discs, even if only a couple were sold to the public. Other companies did not. Officially. Decca and Brunswick did not officially make splatterwax discs, but they still made a few. They made them for Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby's personal copies of Decca and Brunswick discs were occasionally done in colored vinyl. All the copies of these discs that I'm aware of were originally part of the Bing Crosby estate, but that doesn't necessarily mean there were not some others. In addition, this copy of a Roy Smeck disc on Decca popped up in an auction a few years ago. I'm not sure who ended up with it, I just know that one also was not me. Now would probably be a good time to mention the Morrison Record Company. That's what you see back here. The Morrison Record Company made discs in brilliant, bright, extremely saturated, gorgeous splatter vinyl. If you ever see a Morrison 78, grab it. $20 is not out of the question, even if you hate the music. If you do happen to find one that has music you like, you should probably be prepared to pay more than $20 because the odds of you finding another copy are not particularly good. It should be pointed out that Mr. Morrison's descendants are actively pursuing copies of his discs and the discs that bear his name. So if you find any, do a quick search online. It will provide you with the information you need to get a hold of the Morrison Company. I don't have permission to give that information in my video, so I'm not going to do it, but it's online. It's not tough to find. It's a pretty well-known secret that employees who worked at record pressing plants, especially in the overnight hours when the supervision wasn't quite as intense, would occasionally go a little bit rogue and have a little bit of fun. These clandestine, multicolored pressings are highly prized by collectors, at least collectors who collect colored vinyl or colored wax records. This record that I'm about to pop up here is by Al Colombo's Golden Glades Orchestra, and it appeared on Famous 3066. This would have been pressed late 1921-ish. It was recorded in New York City, but the colors are a really interesting combination of brown, green, red, and yellow. It should be pointed out there are less than 10 records on this label that are splatterwax that are known to exist. This is the only known copy of this specific disc. My prize splatterwax disc, however, is sitting right here on the desk. It is an ultra-rare splatterwax Paramount disc. It's a copy of the Frisco Syncopators performing My Sunny Tennessee, a nice jazzy dance band tune. Now, to my knowledge, all known Paramount splatterwax discs were found in the wild at the same time by John Tefteller on one of his legendary buying trips. They apparently came from the daughter of a Wisconsin chair factory employee. Now, the Wisconsin Chair Factory was actually the company that pressed Paramount records. According to John, this lady had a stack of about 20 splatterwax discs that her father had pressed during overnight shifts, and they were on 3 different labels. Now, she didn't want to sell the discs, but Mr. Tefteller convinced her to sell him the Paramounts, of which there were about 8. It should be noted that of the Paramounts that John Tefteller picked up, only one was a blues record. And unsurprisingly, that still belongs to John Tefteller. However, that leads us to a couple of thoughts. First of all, if John Tefteller only bought the Paramounts, does that mean there are more of these clandestine splatterwax pressings still out there? Maybe. I mentioned that there were 3 different labels that John saw. One of them, Paramount, which he bought. The other 2, Puritan and Famous. I guess the next question is whether this Famous disc I have is one of the discs that John Tefteller saw on his trip. Interestingly enough, they were both pressed in basically the same color combination. More interestingly, if you look at this label very closely, you'll notice something. This Famous disc is actually a pasteover. The Famous label is pasted over, yeah, you guessed it, it's pasted over a Paramount label. That, of course, brings up another question. If these weren't being issued to the public, why did they bother putting the pasteover label on it? I don't have an answer to that, but maybe down the road, a topic for another video. I hope you've enjoyed this little look into 78 RPM splatterwax discs. I realize that in 2020, pretty much every single disc that's being physically pressed is being pressed in a whole bunch of colors. But back in 1920, that was definitely not the case. It's the exception, not the rule. And those discs, even some of the Pathé discs, which were issued as part of their regular public issue, those can be scarce, but they are out there. Go find them. We will see you next week on the 78 RPM channel.